The day I found out my grandmother had left me her lake house in Muskoka and her investment portfolio, enough to change my life completely, I drove home with my heart so full I was practically shaking at the wheel. I rehearsed what I was going to say to my husband the whole way down the 400. You're not going to believe this. We're going to be okay. We're actually going to be okay. He was standing on the front porch when I pulled into the driveway. My sister-in-law was beside him, both of them in their coats like they'd been waiting. I thought something was wrong. I thought maybe someone had called. I got out of the car already asking what happened. My husband held out an envelope. "We need to talk," he said. Not hello, not how did it go. Just an envelope, and that tone he used when he'd already made a decision he wasn't asking me to agree with. Inside the envelope were separation papers. I stood on my own driveway in the November cold and I read the first page. Then I looked up at him. Then at my sister-in-law, who had the nerve to look relieved. "The house is already listed," he said. "I had a realtor in last week. You'll want to find somewhere to stay by the end of the month." I didn't cry, I didn't yell. Something very quiet happened inside me, like a door closing softly on a room I'd been standing in for 7 years. I smiled. "Okay," I said. He blinked. My sister-in-law looked at him. He looked back at me. "That's it, okay?" "That's it," I said. "Okay." What neither of them knew, what I hadn't told a single person, was that I'd already spoken to a lawyer. 3 weeks earlier, when I first started noticing things. Little things. A bank statement that came to the house for an account I didn't recognize. A real estate brochure tucked into the recycling. My husband on the phone in the garage at 11 at night, talking low and fast the way he only did when he thought I couldn't hear. I hadn't said anything. I'd taken photos. My husband's name isn't worth spending many words on. I'll call him my husband. And that's already more than he deserves. We met in our late 20s at a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. Ironic, because he turned out to be the least charitable person I've ever known. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming, fully present, a little intense, the kind of eye contact that makes you feel like the most important person in the room. I was 31 when we married. I thought I was lucky. His sister had never liked me. She made that clear early, in small ways, the kind of small ways that are designed to be deniable. A comment about my cooking at Christmas. A pause before answering when someone asked how the wedding planning was going, a pause just long enough to mean something. She smiled at me the way certain women smile at other women, with her mouth, not her eyes. My husband always said I was reading into things. 7 years of marriage, no children, which I used to feel sad about and now feel only grateful for. I worked as a project manager for a mid-sized construction firm in Toronto. He worked in commercial real estate. We owned a semi-detached in the East End bought together, both our names on the title, or so I believed. I found out in September that he'd forged a document. I won't go into every detail of how I found out, because some of it is still before the courts and my lawyer has asked me to be careful about what I say publicly. What I will say is this. I am a project manager. I manage timelines, budgets, contractors, permits, and documentation. I am very, very good at reading documents, and when something in a document doesn't line up, a date that's slightly off, a signature that sits differently on the page than mine usually does, I notice. I brought the document to a forensic document examiner, a woman who works out of an office in Mississauga and who has testified in court more times than I've renewed my driver's license. She looked at it for 20 minutes and then took her glasses off. "This isn't your signature," she said. "I know," I said. "Do you want to know what your options are?" "I already know my options," I said. "I need to know what you can put in writing." She put it in writing. What my husband had done, with help from his sister who worked in mortgage administration and apparently knew enough about the process to be dangerous, was attempt to register a transfer of interest on our shared property. He'd been trying to move my half of the house into a numbered company. The numbered company, as I would later learn, was controlled by his sister. He wasn't trying to sell the house out from under me. He was trying to own it without me, and then sell it, and then tell me it was already done. The plan, as far as I can reconstruct it, was this: present me with separation papers, inform me the house was on the market, let me believe I had no legal claim, and walk away with everything while I scrambled to find a basement apartment somewhere on the Danforth. What he hadn't counted on was that I'd noticed in September, and that I'd spent October building a file. The morning after he handed me those papers, I called my lawyer from the parking lot of a Tim Hortons on Kingston Road. I'd slept at my friend's place. She lives in Leslieville. She has a pull-out sofa and she made me tea without asking questions. which is exactly the kind of friend everyone should have. My lawyer, a woman who speaks the way certain people speak when they are so competent they no longer feel the need to perform confidence, listened to me go through everything I had. The document examiner's report, photographs of the bank statements, a recorded phone call made with compliance under Canadian law. Ontario is a one-party consent province, and I had been a party to a conversation that turned out to be very illuminating. In the call, my husband discussed the timeline with his sister. He used the phrase, "she won't fight it." He said it with the certainty of someone who had spent 7 years confusing patience with passivity. My lawyer was quiet for a moment after I finished. "You've been thorough," she said. "I had time," I said. He thought I wasn't paying attention. She filed an emergency injunction that afternoon to prevent any sale or transfer of the property. The listing came down within 48 hours. The realtor, when contacted by my lawyer's office, had not been aware that the property was jointly owned and that one owner had not consented to the listing. He was not a happy man. My husband called me 4 times that day. I let them all go to voicemail. The 5th time I picked up. "What did you do?" he said. "I want to be clear about something. I am not a vengeful person by nature. I'm not someone who spends energy on anger. What I felt, standing in that Tim Hortons parking lot with my phone pressed to my ear, wasn't rage. It was something much quieter and much more permanent. It was the feeling of having been right about something you desperately hoped you were wrong about, and having the paperwork to prove it. I protected myself," I said. "That's all. You had no right. I had every right. My name is on the title. My name is also on the document your sister filed, except it isn't actually my name, which is a problem for both of you." Silence. "You should talk to a lawyer," I said. "An actual one, not your sister's friend from the golf club." I hung up. What happened next moved faster than I expected, and slower than I wanted, the way legal proceedings always do. My lawyer filed a civil claim for fraud. The document examiner's report formed the core of it, the forged signature, the attempt to transfer my interest without consent. In Ontario, that's not a gray area, that's fraud. That's also potentially a criminal matter, and while the civil case moved forward, my lawyer made a referral to the appropriate authorities and let them decide what they wanted to do with it. What they wanted to do with it, as it turned out, was quite a lot. My sister-in-law's position in mortgage administration meant she had access to systems and processes that she had, according to the investigation, used in ways that went considerably beyond my case. There were 2 other instances, different properties, different people. She had apparently decided that her professional access was a resource to be leveraged, and she had leveraged it for years. I only found out about the other cases later, from my lawyer, who heard from the Crown Attorney's office. By that point, my sister-in-law had been suspended from her position pending investigation. By that point, a lot of things had happened. The afternoon the investigators came to the house, still my house, with the injunction in place. I was not there. My lawyer had advised me not to be, and I had listened. I heard about it afterward from my neighbor across the street, a retired teacher named. Well, she asked me not to use her name, so I'll just say she's in her 70s. She grows the best tomatoes on the street, and she watched the whole thing from her front window with the calm interest of someone who has seen a great deal of life. 2 vehicles, she told me later over tea. Your husband came out first. His sister a few minutes after. They both looked very surprised. I imagine they did. My husband had been so certain I wouldn't fight, and I understand why. I am by nature a quiet person. I process things internally, I don't raise my voice. I had spent 7 years in a marriage where my quietness had been mistaken for compliance, my patience mistaken for weakness, my willingness to let things go mistaken for not noticing them. But there is a difference between letting something go and filing it away. I had been filing for a long time. The thing about my grandmother's estate is that I hadn't known about the full extent of it until the reading of the will, which took place at a law office in downtown Barrie on a Tuesday afternoon in November. My grandmother was a careful woman. She'd grown up without much and spent her adult life building a small business, a property, a portfolio of modest investments that had over decades become something considerably less modest. She left the Muskoka property to me. She left the investment accounts to me. She left a letter, too, which the lawyer read aloud at the end, and which I will not repeat here because it was private, and because it made me cry, and because some things are not for sharing. What I will say is that my grandmother had known, in the way certain older women know things, not from being told but from watching, that my marriage was not right. She had said to me once, about 2 years before she died, You are allowed to want more than this, you know. I hadn't known what to say. I'd said something deflecting, something like things are fine, and she'd looked at me with the particular patience of someone who has lived long enough to know that fine is not the same as good. The total value of what she left me, between the property and the investments, came to just over $940,000. I did not tell my husband. Not because I was hiding it, I genuinely hadn't had the chance, since he met me on the porch with separation papers the same evening, but because, when I stood there reading those papers, I made a decision so fast it barely felt like a decision at all. It felt like instinct. The kind of knowing that bypasses the brain entirely and goes straight to the spine. He is not going to know about this until it no longer matters what he knows. My lawyer, when I told her, set down her pen. The inheritance came through after he filed? The same day. A few hours earlier, and you didn't tell him. He handed me separation papers and told me I needed to find somewhere to stay by end of month. I didn't feel a strong obligation to share financial news. She picked up her pen again. Good, she said simply, and wrote something down. Under the Divorce Act and the Family Law Act in Ontario, property inherited during a marriage is generally treated differently from joint matrimonial assets. It can often be excluded from equalization, particularly if it remained separate. My grandmother's estate came to me directly into an account in my name alone, and it never commingled with our joint finances. My lawyer made sure the documentation was immaculate. He had wanted to leave me with nothing. He had handed me those papers on the same day I became, quietly and unexpectedly, a woman with options. The civil proceedings ran through the winter and into the spring. My husband retained a lawyer who was less competent than he deserved and more expensive than he could afford. He made 2 attempts to claim a share of the inherited property. Both were rejected. He made one attempt through his lawyer to suggest that the document his sister had filed was a miscommunication, a paperwork error, the word forged appearing nowhere in the letter. The document examiner testified. The phrase paperwork error did not survive the week. His sister's situation was more serious. The Crown proceeded with charges related to her professional conduct. The other cases, the ones I hadn't known about, formed the spine of the case against her. My matter was one piece of a larger picture. She had been doing this quietly for years, in small enough amounts, and with enough plausible deniability that it had gone unnoticed. It hadn't gone unnoticed by the people she'd done it to. They simply hadn't known until the investigation opened that they weren't alone. I gave a statement. I answered every question I was asked. I handed over every photograph, every document, every voicemail I'd saved. I had kept everything. My husband, the word still sits strangely even now, pleaded that he hadn't known the full extent of what his sister had done, that he'd simply trusted her, that the document with my signature had been presented to him as legitimate, that he hadn't known it was forged. I don't know whether any of that is true, I genuinely don't. What I know is that he knew the numbered company existed. He knew the listing had gone up. He knew I hadn't agreed to any of it. Whatever his precise level of involvement in the mechanism, he had known the result he was trying to produce, and the result he was trying to produce was that I would end up with nothing. The civil judgment came through in April. The house, our house, the semi on the east end, was ordered to be sold with the proceeds split according to our respective interests, minus the costs assessed against him for the fraudulent transfer attempt. His share of the legal costs was substantial. His lawyer's fees had been substantial. His sister's legal situation meant she was no longer in a position to help him financially. He made considerably less from the sale than he'd planned. I made considerably more from the settlement than he'd expected. I want to say something here because I think it matters. I know what it feels like to stand in a driveway in November with an envelope in your hands and the sudden understanding that the person you built your life with has been making different plans. I know what it feels like to drive to your friend's apartment and sit on her pull-out sofa and wonder if you were an idiot for not seeing it sooner. I know the particular exhaustion of holding something alone for months. The evidence, the knowledge, the quietly gathered proof. Because you understand that if you show it too early, you lose the protection it gives you. I am not telling this story to seem impressive. I am telling it because I spent a long time in that marriage feeling like I was the one who was too much, too sensitive, too careful, too serious. He used to say I overthought things. He used to say I needed to relax. I relaxed until I had a forensic document examiner's report in my hands, and a lawyer who said you've been thorough with the tone of someone paying a genuine compliment. Trusting yourself, your eyes, your instincts. That small, persistent voice that says something here doesn't add up is not overthinking. It is the most important skill I have ever used. Not in my career, not in any project I've managed with its hundreds of moving parts and impossible timelines. In my own house. In the parking lot of a Tim Hortons on a Thursday morning with a phone pressed to my ear and 7 years of careful, quiet noticing sitting in a folder on my laptop. I bought a condo in the fall. East End still. I love this part of the city, I'm not leaving it for anyone. 2 bedrooms, south-facing, with a little balcony where I've already managed to kill 2 plants and am attempting a third. The Muskoka property I'm keeping. My grandmother had a dock, a canoe, a wood stove that takes exactly 20 minutes to get going properly. Last summer, I went up for 3 weeks and I didn't look at my work email once after 6 o'clock. My friend, the one with the pull-out sofa and the tea and no questions, came up for a weekend in August. We sat on the dock in the late afternoon and watched the light change on the water, that particular Muskoka gold that happens around 7 o'clock when the sun is low and the lake goes completely flat. "Are you okay?" she asked. I thought about it. Actually thought about it the way you can only do when you're somewhere quiet and there's nothing pressing in on you. "Yeah," I said. "I think I genuinely am." She nodded. She didn't make it a bigger thing than it was. That's the best kind of friend. I am 38 years old. I am a project manager. I own 2 properties and a modest but growing investment portfolio and a canoe that needs revarnishing. I have a balcony plant that I am determined, this time, not to kill. My husband, my ex-husband I should say, is appealing one portion of the civil judgment. His lawyer sent a letter in March. My lawyer responded, "That process will take as long as it takes, and I have given it approximately the amount of mental real estate it deserves, which is not very much." There is a version of this story where I fell apart in that driveway, where I took the envelope and went inside and cried and called him and begged him to talk about it and let him talk me into believing I was overreacting. There were moments in the months before, when I came close to that version, when I was so tired of holding everything carefully that I almost put it down. I'm glad I didn't put it down. My grandmother used to say that the women in our family are slow to start and hard to stop. I used to think she meant stubbornness. I think now she meant something else. I think she meant that we take our time, that we watch and we learn and we wait for the right moment, and when the right moment comes, we don't hesitate. She was right about that. She was right about most things, as it turned out. The water was gold and the dock was warm, and my friend was laughing at something I'd said, and above us the Muskoka sky was doing that enormous thing it does in August when there's nothing between you and it. I thought, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed it.